Have you seen that TikTok?
No, I don't really watch
Where the
TikTok.
guy's like, he's like, Jabria, are you smart? And she's like, yes. And it's like hilarious. And then the guy like actually asks them questions like, it's like, oh, and they're toddlers. They're toddlers. The guy's like, oh, what language do they speak in Spain? And they'll be like, boop, boop, beep, bop. And you're like, what? I've seen like a bunch of those on TikTok and it's so funny.
You know what? The one thing I will say about TikTok is, you know, it as much as cringe as it is, it's pretty entertaining sometimes. Like there's a lot of creative people on there.
If you're on the right TikTok page, I'll say if you're on sea shanty TikTok, great, because you can hear all the harmonies and the vocal ranges of different people duetting it, and it sounds so amazing. If you're on baby TikTok, if you're on dog TikTok, that's fun. If you're on educational TikTok, great too.
Yeah. Like here's the thing though, a lot of people think TikTok is just those crazy like dances that everybody does, and like those are fun and everything, but yeah, like I think our friend Anthony has a TikTok. He has a TikTok on genealogy. Yeah, did you not know?
Unrelated to anything he does, and he's a photographer.
Yeah. Like out of the blue, he just, I think Twayne, you sent me, right?
I sent you his and I'm like, what is Anthony doing these days? And I was like, oh my goodness. But this dude's got a following. And to sort of piggyback on that, like it's not his discipline at all as a creator. He's not into like creating these TikToks and in like, I guess he is as an aside, but he's a photographer primarily, right? And he's kind of found this other niche that he's sort of just thriving off of. And that sort of kind of dives into episode 2 of Inframe podcast, where we're going to be talking about sort of your field or your discipline in photography. I'm Twayne, he's Zeik. Let's get into it.
Cool.
So take me through sort of how you landed on shooting the stuff that you do now. Like tell everybody like what you shoot and like how you kind of got into shooting that specific thing.
Okay. Well, to start off, I mean, I'd never, like right now I consider myself as, you know, a fashion creative photographer, like an editorial photographer. So if you're looking to shoot a certain story, or, you know, tell a story with your, I guess your clothing or product or whatever it is, you know, then I'm your go-to kind of guy. But I wasn't always that. When I started off doing photography in university, it was more so like doing events. So like, I don't know, like society events, you know, those balls or whatever it is, the galas. I'll be camera and flash, taking photos of people, you know, turning it up. That was my thing. And then from there, like I moved on to shooting weddings, and I shot weddings for quite a bit. You know, I didn't quite like being the primary photographer, so I would get into being the secondary photographer or videographer. Sometimes I'll shoot video. And then like it was kind of weird. It was a while before I actually figured out what my discipline was. You know, when people would ask me, I'd be like, yeah, I shoot this, but I also shoot this and that. But then, you know, it wasn't until recently that I started saying, okay, like I don't like shooting weddings. It's a little too crazy for me. And it's the entire day. But I like, you know, photographing stories and telling stories that way. So I started working with agency models, started doing a lot of creatives, that sort of thing. And then from there, I started pitching it to my clients, and telling them, hey, like if you've got clothing or if you've got this, then I can do this. Or sometimes it has nothing to do with fashion, but it's still in the same vein as telling a story. And, you know, I guess that's my discipline, really. That's how I came across it. So what about you, Twayne?
So for me, my discipline right now is I feel like I'm a jack of all trades in a way. And I know that's not the most sort of concrete answer, but I'll say this. I would call myself, I guess, a lifestyle photographer. I do a lot of events and weddings, And I also do just sort of lifestyle shots with like influencers and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, like that stuff pays the bills. I'm not gonna lie. Like a wedding, like 10 to 12 weddings a year, that's decent money for someone who's got a camera and knows how to take a photo, and can, be efficient about it and have a good relationship with their clients. Like that's gonna earn you some good money. Also, the Instagram stuff. Like Instagram is huge, and these influencers are always looking at creating things that separate them from their other content creators. So they'll usually hire a photographer for a lot of their sponsored posts, and they'll budget for that because they want to stand out. They want their content to reach as many people as possible, and quality content will do that. So they'll hire photographers like myself, and it's stuff that you won't necessarily see on my page because it kind of goes back to it's repetitive, and it's kind of the same type of lifestyle shots. And when you're working in that kind of field, and with marketing agencies and things like that, they have a certain look, and you just kind of have to follow it.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's kind of what I do to shoot. And I also do corporate videos as well. That's like my day job, where I do like corporate videos and stuff like that, for my day job. But I don't do it a lot, like every single day, but at least like 3 to 4 times a month, I'll do a corporate video, for my company that I work for. But I would say, like, outside of that, what I enjoy is like filmmaking and telling a story, through motion picture. Like that's my passion, and that's what I really want to do. But at the same time, like I also understand that there are parts of the creative industry that need more content than others, and that are going to have more jobs than others. And I think a lot of people might struggle with that. They're like, well, I don't want to do that. That's boring. But at the same time, it's like you kind of have to pay the bills. So
Hmm.
what are you going to do? You cannot rely solely on hitting a jackpot of somebody picking up your screenplay or your idea for a short film and hope to get that funded. And tomorrow you're going to be nominated for an Academy Award kind of deal. Like, you can have a home run mindset, but you have to know it's going to take some time to get there, and you're going to have all these expenses come up in between, and all these life things that are going to have to be paid for somehow, especially if you want to do this full
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
So I mean, I think for me, like discipline and like the field that I'm in greatly differs from like the passion projects that I want to work for. And that's okay. And I think that's okay. I don't know. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, like I know for me, sometimes you get those jobs that, like sometimes I'll get jobs that aren't necessarily fashion editorial, or that kind of thing, especially in today's like climate with COVID going on and everything. It's really hard to plan something where it's along the lines of a editorial. Actually, a lot of the work that I do right now is graphic design. A lot of it is, creating logos, creating graphic material, just kind of content so that people can post it or use it in their slide decks or that kind of thing. Um, and the biggest thing I think is when we're talking about passion versus discipline. For me, what I'm very passionate about is telling a story, but when it comes down to discipline, sometimes that's not always the case. And so, there's a lot of you photographers out there or creators out there will be faced with that decision where, a lot of the times your portfolio is a lot of your creative work that you were very passionate about, that you kind of, it's your brainchild essentially. But, I've heard this said by a lot of photographers or creators where they go, oh, but I can't put my client work on my portfolio, and that's sort of the wrong mindset to go with, because then you start creating that divide between your client work and your passion work. Like, why can't you have both? Why can't you be doing something that you're passionate about with it? And, I know for myself, the way that I see it is, when I put something on my portfolio, that's what I want my clients to see. That's what I want people that I'm getting creative with to see, is, that's sort of the vein that I'm going with. And that I know from the get go, if I hire this guy, he's going to help me tell a story, versus, oh, like, he takes good photographs, so he could, help me take photos of my house or something, and then all of a sudden it's completely different from what, you know, your passion is, and then all of a sudden you've got that divide between your passion and discipline. And sometimes you have to take those jobs. But I think that, you know, you're in control of that. You know, you can definitely do what you're passionate about while still making that your discipline.
Yeah. And to that point where you talk about that divide, and sometimes I'll admit it, like I will see it with myself. It's like, yeah, I do a lot of this client work, but to me, it's sometimes I can box myself in a little bit where it's like,
Hmm.
okay, it's so repetitive. And so I'm always trying to find ways to do things differently or create something new with the same type of content I've been asked to create. So like stuff like that where maybe you thought you want to say for a passion project, you actually work into a client role and a client sees that and it's like, oh, that's really cool. I like that idea. Like you know, you'll feel good about it because it's like, oh, I didn't think this would necessarily work for this type of project, but somehow it works, client loves it. And now you've created something within, you know, the discipline that you're in, but that also reflects a bit of your passion and a bit more of your taste, right? So it's like incorporating that into some of the jobs that you kind of have to just do to kind of get by. And I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's interesting because like I know I can see that divide with my work where I want to be doing something like a bit more different than what I do now, but I know that I have to take a lot more steps to get there, than to kind of just be like turn down every creator influencer kind of gig I get now versus just, you know, trying to, um, you know, just do whatever I want, you know, with my work. So I like with anybody, I think there's going to be steps that you're going to have to take
Yeah.
to kind of find ways to merge both,
Hmm.
or incorporate both. So I think it depends.
Yeah. Like
Depends.
a lot of creators will start off by doing jobs that you don't necessarily enjoy. Like I know for myself, you know, I got into doing weddings and shooting events and stuff, and you know, it's not really what I like to do or what I like to shoot. Um, but you know, when I go to those jobs, I treat it like anything else, you know, something that I am passionate about. And you never
Yeah.
know, like sometimes those gigs lead to, or you know, with those gigs,
Yeah.
you'll end up getting connected to someone who is in the same vein as your passion. You know, like you'll end up, you know, it'll lead to somewhere else. And so, you know, when you're starting out, you kind of have to do those jobs. You kind of have to go and get a feel, and it'll also help you gain experience as well.
Yeah.
You know, like dealing with clients or, you know, being prepared with your gear. You know, sometimes you'll show up at a gig and, you know, some photographers will show up and they're missing a battery or something, or, you know, like midway through your battery dies. What do you do? You know, that kind of thing. So when you, I mean, I'm not, you know, you should be prepared for that kind of stuff. But sometimes things happen, and as you work through those gigs, you gain that kind of experience. You gain that know-how, that you can only gain, you know, through doing those jobs. Sometimes you're making mistakes. Other times, you know, you stumble upon doing something a certain way, and it works beautifully. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't get discouraged if you're doing something that is quite different from your passion, or no, it sometimes
Yeah.
it leads back to the road.
Exactly. And it's a great thing you mentioned that because there's there's a few jobs that I've taken where it's like, oh man, like, yeah, you know what? It pays good. I'm gonna do it. And I'm not necessarily, you know, I or it's like I can't necessarily see how creative, or I can't see how much more creative I could be with this role if I'm just asked to do this. Like the one job that Zeke and I both did was Boots and Hearts,
Yeah.
right? And Boots and Hearts was it's a country music festival in Northern Ontario here in
Yep.
Canada,
Yeah.
and it was 4 days of country music, and all of us listened to gangster rap and drill, so we'd blast that in our cabs, so like in our trailers, and it was just hilarious. Country music all day, and then after 11 p.m. it'd be like you know, just the dirtiest of hip hop and drill beats
Yeah.
playing, and be like hilarious. It's so funny. But what Zeke and I had to do, we were hired as videographers, event videographers, and so we'd have to go around just capturing the day, like certain moments that would happen with, people on the grounds, the artists, that kind of stuff. And, it wasn't something necessarily like both of us were into at the time. And it's just like, it was a job. And that's how we treated it. We were still professional. We still approached it with enthusiasm, and we're still respectful to in every regard. And you have to remember that even though you may not necessarily feel like this is a fit for you, but you still have to do it. Just be professional and kind of go about it like you would any other job, right? And funnily enough, like that turned into other gigs for me, like other video related gigs, because they saw like our work ethic, they saw how professional we were, and that translates. And those are qualities that people will pick up on set, on a job site, or on any type of shoot. So always keep that in the back of your mind when you're doing something that you might not necessarily feel like fits your role as a photographer or your style. It may lead to something down the road, as Zeik mentioned, right? So
yeah, like I know for myself, I'm not a huge fan of country, but I saw it as an opportunity to kind of be like, okay,
none of
well,
our friends are.
no, Twayne's the only one actually.
A little. It's like I'm
A
a closet
little,
country listener.
a
I'm a
little.
closet country music listener.
Okay, all right. He's too modest. He'll actually jam out.
Lock them doors and turn them lights down low.
See, exactly what I mean. No, like I honestly, for me, like I remember that gig. It was a lot of fun. Actually, a few days before that, I went to Oshiega, which is a sort of, I guess it's indie.
It's funny because I shot Oshiega a year after that.
Yeah. Like I remember going to Oshiega, and I love the music at Oshiega. They have something for everyone. But I remember going into that week being like, all right, I need to go to Oshiega, absorb as much good music as I can, or at least music that I prefer. And then, after Oshiega, I have to go to a country festival for 4 days. And, as much as I don't like country, the vibe is actually great. Like the people that were there were amazing. It was still a lot of fun being in that crowd, and like you just can't help but have a good time. But yeah, it was definitely a strenuous weekend. It was 4 days of like nonstop filming. We'd start filming at like 1 in the afternoon till you know wee hours of the morning, midnight,
Yeah.
sometimes past midnight.
Yeah, sometimes they'd be like, go get some like footage of the after parties.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, you got a wristband. They'll let you in anywhere.
Yeah.
Honestly, those wristbands, my God, that's like a Secret Service card. You could get into any nook and cranny of that event ground. I was like,
yeah,
you like walk on stage and they wouldn't even look twice at you because they see the color of your wristband and you just walk on stage.
Yeah.
And as long as the artist was cool with it, you were good. And you were like, sorry, what? This is a different kind of privilege. Like,
yeah, it was fun. Like, those pit areas that like usually, if you make it to the very front of a concert or performance, there's usually like a pit in front of you. That's sort of that gap between you and the artist. That's where we lived for 4 days. Like we would show a wristband.
That was actually kind of sick.
Yeah.
Like, as much as we weren't huge fans of the music, like just to have that experience and knowing how to even approach that experience, at least professionally, right? Like, you have to respect certain artists' wishes. They don't want this photographed of them. You don't want that photographed of them or videoed of them. So it's like now Zeik and I have that experience. And say someone's like, oh, do you guys want to shoot Oshiega? And we're like, yeah, we did so-and-so, Boots and Hearts. And like maybe it's, a concert that we're more, our music tastes are accustomed to or in tune to. So it's like little things like that you'll pick up at these jobs where they're transferable skills or transferable experiences or learning moments, right? So it's to take that with you to take that with you from the jobs you may not necessarily like to the jobs that you will eventually be doing full-time or want to do full-time or anything like that, right? So I think that's pretty cool.
Those early jobs, like when I was first starting out, definitely taught me, certain procedures, like, having a checklist before I leave my apartment or my place, going to a gig, making sure that I have certain pieces of gear, You know,
You saying you wouldn't take all your gear with you? What?
no, that's the thing. Like sometimes it's in certain jobs, you don't have to have all your gear. It actually weighs you down. So, like, you know, that kind of experience going through, yeah, like shooting weddings is not my thing, but at least now I know how to deal with, you know, doing large groups of portraiture, which is a transferable skill when you're working, I guess, like ecom, or if you're doing an editorial, maybe you're shooting with like 13 people at the same time. And so now you know how to light that. You know how to deal with that many people and make sure the shot's still good. And it's what the client's looking for, kind of deal. So yeah, definitely don't chirp on, you know, those other projects, or you know, things that are for other clients that aren't necessarily in line with your passion. Definitely see them as opportunities to learn, or, you know, gain that experience. um
Yeah. And to kind of sort of, I guess, pivot off that a bit, like, what about people or like the creator landscape as of now in like 2020, 2021,
mhm.
where you're seeing more creators do a lot more things, right? You're
Yeah,
looking like, what about like the jack of all trades?
yeah,
Like back in the day, you had a graphic designer as part of your agency, you had a photographer, you might have a dedicated video person or video team. But now you're seeing more and more creators sort of morph into this all-in-one type of solution for clients.
mhm.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, it's funny you say that, because like that's kind of the way that I work. Um, like a lot of the times over the years, like I've, you know, based on the projects that I've worked on and stuff like that, you know, like let's say I worked on an editorial. Well, like after that editorial gets sent to the client, you know, they'll send it off to their editor or whoever, and then I'll see them do some weird graphic design stuff on it. You know, and I was like, why? Like, you know, like why'd you choose this font? You could have done this. You could have, you know. And then from there I started like figuring out, okay, like maybe if I pitch it to my client that I can do this and also deal with the design, then, you know, I'm able to create something that's more cohesive. So yeah, I've sort of become that jack of all trades, where I'm sort of multidisciplinary. But that's also like the way I am. Like I'm very much like a curious person. Like sometimes I'll one of my favorite pastimes is looking at magazines, looking at ads and, you know, editorials in magazines, kind of drawing inspiration from them and seeing what they've done, you know, how coloring was done and how they've used certain types of fonts in that editorial, or how, you know, like how they've used the assets wisely in that particular final piece. And then I start to take that back into my work, start to say, hey, like if I shoot this a certain way and leave like negative space, I'm able to understand that I can put something here that's useful for the client, you know, or I might be able to pitch that idea to them. um yeah, it's definitely tricky to be a jack of all trades, because there's a lot of learning curves. Like there's still some things that I
Yo.
don't want to touch on, like for example animation with After Effects. I can do very basic things, but you know, if someone's asking me for something complex, I'll be like, go find an animator, you know, like they'll definitely know better,
Yeah.
and get it done faster than I would. um but
Yeah.
I think it's definitely useful, picking up on certain skills like that, for sure.
Yeah. Like I think like the basics of certain other, I guess, creative elements or creative areas are kind of necessary, at least right now in the way that our landscape's shaped.
Hmm.
Like a little bit of graphic design knowledge, you know, a little bit of video editing skills, knowing how to take a photo. You know, of course, you're going to have strengths in different areas, and you're also going to have weaknesses. And I think the key is to know what your weaknesses are and not be afraid to lay it out to your clients and sort of, you know, I guess, tame their expectations, right? If you can't do something, don't say that you can, you
Hmm.
know, especially if it's not your discipline. Just don't be like, yeah, can you also do the graphic design for this campaign in addition to the photos?
Yeah.
And you don't know the first thing about graphic design, or you don't know why certain fonts are chosen over others, or why certain design elements are used versus others, like things like that. If you don't have the knowledge, don't be afraid to tell your client that. Be like, okay, look, I don't know, but I may know a person that could help me that I've worked with in the past that can do XYZ in terms of graphic design,
Hmm.
right? And I relate to this so much because at work I have to do graphic design stuff. And the measuring stick I use is Zeik. So Zeik's like, how would Zeik do this, if he was going to design it? So anytime I have to design something for work, I look at like Zeek stuff for inspiration or what he's done. And it's so weird because like I'll take bits and pieces and then I'll make it my own. And then I realize like, shit, this actually doesn't look good because I've tried to make it my own and I'm not really using graphic design principles. So it's like, yeah, I'm no good at this. But so I always default to something really basic. So it's like things like that. Like my work knows that I'm not a graphic designer. Like they primarily hired me as a photographer, a
Photo take.
a photographer. Yeah, a photo taker, a photographer and a videographer and storyteller, because that's my skill set. But of course, posters still need to be designed. Communications still need to look good, that kind of stuff. So I do that too as part of my role. But I also understand my limitation. And I think that's key, especially when a lot of clients are looking for all-in-one solutions in creators, is to be forthright and be like, I don't think I can do this, but here's who would be able to do it. So don't be afraid to do that either. And if it's something that you're looking to add to your arsenal, spend the time to actually learn it. And, that's part of who you are and what you offer as a creator, as a freelancer. You can offer that and it's added value for your business. Even though it might not be your discipline, you can add that on and sort of still build that to your client and charge that to your client instead of them going to somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's more so, the way I look at it is like you're investing in yourself to learn that knowledge, right? So it's kind of nice to have.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to sort of lay out your limitations.
Yeah.
If there are, should you have any, if you think you are limited. So
well, one key thing about,
I mean, I'll say like, yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say is like, I started off as a photographer first. I wasn't a videographer first. And I started to get into videography and I realized like, shit, I like this a lot more. So I spent the time to learn everything about it. And now I could be like, yeah, I'll shoot that. I think this is what you're going to need for this type of shoot, XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot more video jobs than I do photo jobs. I'll say that. So,
yeah, no, like definitely, on the topic of knowing your limitation, in order to know your limitation, you kind of have to get creative. You have to do those creatives. A lot of people, neglect to do things that, to do those passion projects or to experiment. And you need to give yourself that space to fuck up, I guess, to really just, sometimes you're going to do something and you need to give yourself that sort of environment where you can mess up. Because, when you're on a client shoot or, when you're doing a project, you can't really mess up. It's not one of those things that, it's just, you can't do it. But when you give yourself that space, when you're doing a creative or you're experimenting, you're giving yourself that space to mess up, know your limits, and know, okay, like my piece of gear can only do so much in these situations. If I really want to get this look, then, I'm going to have to buy a new piece of gear or I'm going to have to change my light setup. That's where you really start to push your boundaries. And then you take whatever you learn in your creatives and you bring that back. You bring that back to your clients. And I think that's what I'm lead back to what I was saying before, is that, when you're putting stuff on your portfolio, that's sort of your latest menu per se that you're pitching to your clients. That's your latest and greatest work, where you've, that's probably your latest creative or your latest project that you've, the latest techniques that you've learned, and you're starting to put that and pitch it to them and say, this is what I can do currently. And then you get those jobs. And then, a few months down the road or a month down the road, you do a new creative where you're able to pick up new skills and experiment again. So definitely, that's where you learn your limit. That's where you put it. And you definitely grow as a creative for sure.
Okay. I got a question. I guess I could ask you. Okay. So say you are, actually, I'll start this again. So say you, oh my God.
Cat's got your tongue?
Yeah, a little bit. So say you've just started out
Yeah.
in photography, right?
Hmm.
And you've kind of learned the ins and outs of it, or whatever creative discipline you've chosen to get into, or creative area you've chosen to get into. Like
Hmm.
you're starting to see that people might require your services. Um, how do you go about, or what advice would you give to people that are looking to get into one discipline? Like, what would you say to them? Or like, how would you tell people to go about getting into that discipline if they've got limited experience in it, and are
Yeah.
looking to gain more experience in it?
Yeah. Like trying, like, I guess what you're asking is trying how someone can line up their passion with their discipline. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like that too. I guess it sort of falls in the same vein.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is really um, trying to stay focused on it. Like, obviously, your first couple of jobs are going to be, the standard like wedding jobs and family portrait stuff. And, those are kind of standard photography. Like, I wouldn't say beginner jobs because a lot of people have that's their discipline. That's what they do full time. Um, but, like as a photographer, that's, chances are that those are your projects that you're getting right off the bat. But again, like what I was saying before was, when you're doing those creatives, don't just do them because they look cool. Like, don't just do them because you're like, oh, like this is something I really, really want to achieve, like this look or whatever. And, um, when you're doing creatives, have that in your mind that this is sort of where you want to go, the direction you want to go with your photography. When you're finding your clients, like this is sort of the work that you want to do. Um, because like I was saying before, is that when you do these creatives, that's where you pick up on those skills. You start to learn certain things, um, and then you bring that back to your client, or you start looking for clients that kind of fit that, right? Like, for example, if you're shooting product photography, if you're doing a creative where you've got a desk set up, you've got a backdrop, your lights are all there, if you put that on your website and start, you know, pitching yourself and like I guess promoting yourself as that kind of photographer, then you're gonna see that they're gonna see that, oh, this person does product photography, maybe I should hit them up, you know. Rather than you start throwing up random stuff on there, your previous projects, your previous client work, and then they start looking, they're like, oh, like are you a family photographer, but you also do, you shoot sneakers, or that kind of thing. You kind of want to have your
Lay out
portfolio.
a clear message. Yeah.
Yeah, you want it to be very I guess very direct. Or sorry, you want to have a direction with your work. That's probably the most important thing. And then, that's where you start to pick up on clients that, line up with your passion, and then your passion and discipline start to overlap. And you start to work on projects that you're actually passionate about. Um,
And in the end, it doesn't feel like work because it's your passion, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I mean, and also in, in sort of the same sort of breath, don't disregard the value of networking either,
hmm.
because meeting people from different disciplines and different passions and different creative perspectives is gonna allow you to open your mind to those things and form your own opinions and your own vision about some of those fields or things that you'd want to shoot, right? So I think networking is also a key thing, especially when you're just starting out and looking to find what sort of your signature is going to be, whether you're going to be a lifestyle, product, wedding, that type of photographer or
Hmm.
creator. So, networking, I think, is something that needs to be sort of emphasized, because I really wouldn't be where I am now without the network I've sort of built.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. And again, like you never know where some of your other projects will lead. Like the biggest form of advertising that any photographer creator or videographer has is word of mouth. Like your clients talk to other people, and your clients probably have other people they know that, might fit the projects that you want to do. And they'll come up to you and be like, "Hey, so I got a friend who, wants, you know, a fashion editorial done. They're creating a whole clothing line. Would you be interested in shooting that?" And then that's where that network comes into play. You never know where things lead. down the road. It could be, a few months from now. It could be a year. It's all worth for something. Nothing. Your time's never wasted on something. The only time that you waste is time that you're not doing anything or you're not progressing forward with your work. So, yeah.
Just sort of speaking about networking itself, what's sort of the biggest network that you can sort of trace with your creative work? Like, sort of, if you didn't know these people or didn't make a good impression with these people, you may have not gotten that job or a job down the line.
Trying to think. I'm still trying to think. I mean, the job that comes to mind first, because we just talked, is Boots and Hearts. And Boots and Hearts came to be because of Anthony, actually. So, I didn't know this at the time, but there's such a thing as Shutterstock Premium or Custom, where
Shutterstock Custom.
So Shutterstock Custom basically, what it is it's basically stock footage or stock images that's tailored specifically for a certain company. So, for example, Boots and Hearts went to Shutterstock and was like, "Hey, we want stock footage to be able to use for future music festivals." Right?
Yeah, it's funny. It's Boots and Hearts went to Live Nation, who kind of runs Boots and Hearts.
Right.
And Live Nation uses Shutterstock as their vendor, or used Shutterstock as their vendor, at least for when we did Boots and Hearts.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like just a tree.
Yeah. So what I didn't know at the time is that Shutterstock will actually send emails out, or there's actually a section for photographers that they'll send out these projects, and then those photographers can actually apply. Like, for example, for Boots and Hearts, they were like, we need videographers and we need photographers that can shoot this type of event and create content, so that it's stuff that they can use for promos, stuff that they can use like throughout that week to promote the actual event, and even for future festivals too. And this was something that Anthony actually knew. He was enrolled in their program, and he got the email, and they happened to be looking for, I think it was like 5 photographers and 3 videographers.
3 videographers. It's funny because I don't know if he told you, but he's like, I just said yes, not knowing that you guys would be available even. I was like, look, I can get a team of 7 people. I got this. And like Anthony, like bull in a china shop, was like, I can assemble a team. We're going to do it. And I remember, because I think Anthony called Drew, and then Drew called me. I was sitting at the 500 levels of a Blue Jays game, and Drew's like, want to shoot Boots and Hearts? And I'm like, sorry, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, he's like, yeah, just send me your reel tonight. And I was like, okay. So I was like, I leave the Jays game early, go home, update my reel, send it to Andrew so he could send it to Anthony. Mm-hmm. And then I think within 2 days we got confirmation that we were shooting the festival.
Yeah, like I know on our side, because at the time I didn't know Twayne.
I didn't know Zeik either.
I had no idea.
So weird.
Twayne was a thing. But basically, Anthony came. We have a group chat, and there's a few of us in there, a few photographers. And Anthony was like, "Hey, so I just got this email, this gig from Shutterstock. Do you guys want to be a part of my team?" And at first I was like, to be at a country festival, I don't know, like that's not really my shtick. But then we all were like, like, you know what? It sounds like a pretty interesting gig. They're giving us board and lodging, and they're feeding us for all of those days. And the pay was pretty decent, and you're at a festival. It's gonna be a good time regardless. So we were like, yeah, like let's go, let's do it. And then from there, we all stuck together. That's where I met Twayne. Like when I first met him, he was very much a bro kind of person. Like, he had a bandana on. He had like he had this.
That was so the sweat wouldn't get in my eyes, man. Dude, it was like 35 plus degrees.
My first impression.
I also was carrying the Ronin. I was also carrying out the Ronin the entire weekend. Okay, the Ronin is not a light gimbal.
No, it's
I
not.
will say that.
It's not.
Okay, and so and so this guy thinks I'm a bro just because I wear a bandana for the sweat.
No,
like,
he was very much a bro, because I remember the entire weekend this guy would just say, "Yo, sauce me that battery, sauce me that SD card. So like, and like just things that
It's
he
because
would
Drew
say.
says sauce.
No.
It's because Drew says sauce. I spent a lot of time with Drew.
Wait, did he learn it from you or did you learn
Our
it from
friend
him?
also just. I learned it from
Oh.
him because he would just say, like, yo, sauce me your late meter.
Sauce
And
me
I'm
that.
like, what? Sauce you? Okay, but here's the thing. Sauce. Okay, I used to play hockey. This is a sidetrack. Sauce is to like sauce a pass. Like it's a saucer pass, right? So it's like I'm not unaccustomed to that type of terminology. So it's like, oh yeah, I'll sauce it to you. And sauce, just put it on a pillow, you know, for a clapper from the
Oh
point.
my god. But yeah, so that's how we got to shoot one of the biggest gigs that we worked on, and that's how Twayne and I got to meet. And you know, many years later, we're now podcast. So I guess that's
doing this podcast. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and it's like that's only like what 2 degrees of separation. It's like Andrew and then Anthony, and like that's really about it, at least for me. And I mean, I look at things now, even for myself, at my network now. I know I shoot with one of my friends. We've known each other since we were 15, and we both worked at the same after school program. And so she, I don't know, like I went to university and, you know, she carried on with her life. She had a kid and she was getting into mom blogging and that kind of stuff and being a mom creator, right? And she was starting to realize that she's starting to get some money from it and she wanted to up her level by, you know, taking nicer photos. And she saw that I was getting into photography. So I think we had a shoot at the beginning of 2018. And that's when I was starting to make a little bit of money too from photography. And so she paid me for it and it was super cool. And now I work with her on pretty much every social media campaign that she has, right? So that has actually led to me to shoot at Oshiega. That's led me to shooting with like other people, like people that know Drake and stuff. Like it's crazy where that network's led me. So but then it might not be like huge gigs, but like just the people that I know and that I've met from that one person taking a chance on me and liking my work has opened so many doors for me, right? And it's kind of crazy to kind of look back on. And I was like, oh yeah, it's like I got this job because this person knew that person, and then this person knew that person. And so I guess like never undervalue how much networking is an asset to who you are as a creator, right? Because it can lead you to opening some pretty wild doors. So, I mean, whether you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out what your discipline is going to be in the creative space, or right now maybe your discipline doesn't align with your passions, there are several ways that you can go about getting to where those two align. You know, don't disregard networking, don't disregard making mistakes and doing creatives in the thing that you're passionate about, because that's going to lead you one step closer to it. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. You know, feel free to leave us comments in the YouTube video, or you can also follow us at Inframe Podcast on Instagram as well. And we will see you guys in the next episode.